Welcome to the Ransomware Battleground, where we dive into the world of cybersecurity and hear firsthand from those that are deep in the fight to protect your data and peace of mind. Think your network is secure? Let's check out how secure you really are with this week's chat, Tactics and Measures for Ransomware in the Enterprise. I'm joined today with Paul Fredrickson, cybersecurity consultant, most recently with Dell, and Jeff Mann, information security evangelist, a noted contributor to the Tribe of Hackers book series. Today's conversation is focused on the importance of process and procedures to secure our environment, but we also dig in to understand the motivations on why hackers are attacking with increasing sophistication. I'm your host and moderator, Sia Yasser-Tornrat. Before we get started, I've got to give a shout out to our sponsor, Airgap, the best defense against ransomware. With a zero-trust isolation platform, Airgap confines ransomware to a single device. Put an end to threat propagation and protect your infrastructure in minutes, not months. Now, let's enter the battleground. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Ransomware Battleground. My name is Sia, and today's conversation, super excited to talk about tactics and measures for ransomware in the enterprise workplace. I might add a little bit more to SMB just because I'm part of that SMB world. Today, joining us is Mr. Paul Fredrickson, my very good friend and information security consultant extraordinaire. Paul, welcome.
Hello.
And Jeff Mann, information security evangelist at Online Business Systems and all-around nice guy, though he claims to be your curmudgeon. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, Sia, it's nice to join you today. It's not a claim. I am a member of something called the Cabal of the Curmudgeons. So it's a capital C official lifetime membership.
Oh, I love it.
Do you get a card with that too? I mean,
no, I do get a shot glass though.
Oh, there you go.
Nice. Oh, hey, this sounds like my kind of organization. Although something tells me I'm a little too peppy.
Yeah, it's early in the morning, perhaps for you.
Well, we are.
Time.
Well, you know, it's Friday. It's morning everywhere, right? So, gentlemen, I do want to kind of just kick things off with, you know, we talk about ransomware attacks in general, and we've seen in 2020 a huge increase in the double extortion attacks and just ransomware in general and hacking overall as the pandemic has really forced a remote workforce. And so I kind of want to chat up a little about some recent attacks that we've seen. I'd like your opinions on it. And it's not necessarily just ransomware, just in general, because a couple of these stories kind of freaked me out. So one very recent, as of this week, is a Florida water plant attack. And when I saw that, it wasn't so much that I was surprised that the plant was attacked. It was the idea of, wait a second, these hackers really are going after infrastructure. I mean, could you guys imagine if the lie concentration were actually to go out there and we didn't manage it, or they didn't want to manage the water, the implications of public health? So I ask you guys, am I being sensationalistic and freaking out a little bit of saying how easy it sounded like that this hack happened?
No, you're not. I mean, that's the short answer. I mean, it doesn't fill up a lot of time, but it shows the systemic failure of security for this public resource, which, you know, could kill thousands of people. Because, you know, it's the same with the power plants, right? Like, we're in the middle of a cold wave here in Texas right now. If someone did go after the water system, but let's say they went after like the electric grid, and, you know, some senior citizen was sitting at home in front of their little space heater, you know, you turn off the electricity, that person could freeze. You know, it's not quite as dramatic as poison water, but, you know, the infrastructure hacks they should keep you up at night.
Yeah, I was actually going to say it's kind of a yes and no as far as I'm concerned. I agree with everything that Paul has said, but on the flip side, if you look at the motivation of the attacker, and that's something that has been, you know, studied for many years. I don't know how well it's understood these days, but I'm DoD trained. I learned, I worked for an organization that did InfoSec. That was all we did. back at the National Security Agency in the mid 80s to the mid 90s. And the way I learned it there, the bad guys, what we called threats, or what is more commonly known as a threat actor these days, there was a lot of attention and a lot of research paid to what the motivation of the attacker was. And from the beginnings of the internet and in internet security, which is what we call this industry in the early days, in the early to mid 90s, what we now call cyber. The motivation back then in the early days was mostly sort of bragging rights. It was that proverbial kid in the basement of his mom's house, just seeing where he could go. The movie War Games. It was that type of thing. For most of the last 20 years, the focus, the motivation of attackers has been, and very successful, I might add, trying to make money, trying to monetize it. I mean, that's why ransomware is so prevalent right now, is because people figured out how to monetize something, and and there's an element of society that's going to try to capitalize on that. What's not often talked about, but has been long understood, is and this sort of goes back to the Cold War and espionage, which is sort of what I grew up in. The motivation of the bad guy, the attacker, is politically motivated, or think of the various green, sort of what we call environmental hackers, hacktivism,
Hacktivism, yeah.
Threat actors that are doing things to try to, for a cause, whether it's political or social, or whatever their aspirations are. We don't often think about, and frankly, I think this is probably why it hasn't happened yet, or as much as we think. The attack against critical infrastructure, and in this case, a water treatment plant, is so far the motivation has been to make money, not so much let's start a war, let's start a civilization ending event. Or something that potentially kills thousands of people. This is just simply my opinion, but I don't think the motivation has been there yet for the proverbial trigger to be pulled. It's not saying it's not coming, but the sad reality is it's very feasible and very doable, as we found out this week.
Well, I mean, it goes back to, like you were saying, the government of this country and their stated policies in information security and internet related types of things, where they prefer offense versus defense. And this is what I try to talk to a lot of people about, is that we prefer to have the best offensive tools in the world, so that we can go do these things to other people. And like what happened with Stuxnet, we started putting these ideas and these techniques and these, let's call them frameworks, out into the into the headspace, or whatever you want to call it, of the rest of the world. And unsurprisingly, the internet has adapted, and they're using the same tools that we used against them on us. And yes, there's the Florida water plant. It seems like it might be a disgruntled employee or something like that. So it's, the motivations do count quite a bit, but the fact that the vulnerabilities are out there, and the proverbial script kiddie can just say, like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I destroyed the water system for a town. Teenagers, I was once a teenager, many years ago, and you would do things just to do them, because you were still trying to figure out what was right and wrong in the world. And there's a lot of that power out there, and that's kind of why I find these more like an existential threat, kind of like Elon Musk with AI, who's saying we need to be very proactive about AI, because if we wait to be reactive when AI is smart enough to basically get around us, we won't have a chance to regulate it, which is a very scary thing to think about.
Well, and along those lines, I mean, most science fiction movie and novel plots that revolve around the advancements of robots and what we now call AI, most of them don't end well.
Not and granted, they're written by humans, and we tend to have a dramatic ending like that always sells more books. But it's if you play the probabilities out, it very well, the advanced computer could think that we're, ants. Like, people don't care if they step on ants typically,
Right.
and if we let it get smart enough where it can do something about that, because, we're in trouble. Because I kind of think of that, because they're building the giant new Tesla factory down here in Austin. And you look at the scale of this building, and you just, see that there's apparently people who've made a career of flying little drones around this building. But I kind of wonder on there, like, are we building the plant that makes the Terminators in some respect? Because, they were showing the robot storage off to the side of this, and it's, just container after container after container, just filled with robots. And you're like, okay, what if these robots don't build us nice new Tesla trucks, and they decide to build, Terminators to come after us?
Wait, so in my other podcast, Innovation Calling, I have been pointing out many times when we talked about AI, though, guys, is that the AI is only as good as the coding that it was put into it. So if you've got a malicious programmer that was like, yeah, you know what, I'm mad today, and I'm going to add in a few lines of code saying, if I get upset, I'm going to do X amount of, code for whatever. So my understanding is Skynet, I've always said I will always be the first one to throw us humans down just so I could survive. I totally admit it.
Well, no, but I'm talking specifically, not to contradict you too much, I'm talking about general AI. You're talking about specific AI. So yeah.
But we're talking about AI in the context of, like, also though, like, in general though, I mean, it's really predominantly more about automation, right? And being more efficient, right? Isn't that where AI really kind of kicked in to increase efficiency? It's not just the robot, right?
Sadly, it's now mostly about picking things for you to listen or watch on Netflix, or having, having your Apple, whatever digital assistant you want, like turn on the lights in your house, or tell you when your packages.
I was just talking about Nike shoes, and now I'm getting ads on my phone for Nike shoes. How is that happening?
Oh, don't even. Yeah,
we don't want to go down the people as a product Facebook discussion here. We'll get a little sidetracked there, because
totally sidetracked. And don't get me started, but I will say this: I was doing a happy hour the other day with my friends, and it was a gift exchange, and we were talking about, gift exchange amongst adult women. Kind of went down a path, and next thing I know, all my ads are coming up with very interesting gifts to give to each other. So yes, we are being listened to.
Free money. Free money.
I know. Send me money.
It goes back to the Target thing, right? Where they were trying out their new advertising system, and then it was, what was it? It was a young girl, and then who was pregnant, and then her father started getting all these pregnancy product related emails, and I'm pretty sure that that ended up pretty dramatically.
Yeah. Those are the marketing tactics here. So we're talking about tactics and measures for this show, you guys, and so. Can either one of you, or both at the same time? I'd be very intrigued to hear your thoughts. But can you explain to me the differences of tactics one should consider, as if they're in the enterprise, if they're an SMB, or if they're maybe like just a home network? Because to clarify, home networks to me feels like an SMB, right? It's not like a 5-node network anymore, right? Now everything under the sun is connected over IP, even your toaster is, right? So it feels like to me the home network is becoming like an SMB network, if you will, of a small business. So can you guys help me understand what tactics is bare minimum to just ensure that they're not at least having a front door wide open for these types of attacks?
So to me, it's a little bit of a trick question, because before you talk tactics, you have to, in my mind, kind of talk motivation. And what motivates an enterprise versus an SMB versus private citizens to do anything, let alone decide, oh, I should do something to make myself more secure and protect the privacy and security of myself, my home, my family, my data, my company, my enterprise, and so on and so forth. It's one of the things that I speak often about, is what's missing is an understanding of a motivation. Why are we doing all these things? In my 25 years being in the private sector, doing mostly consulting, talking to other companies and trying to help them figure out security, the enterprise is, and to some degree the SMB, But private industry in general is driven not so much by the motivation to be more secure and do the right thing and protect their users and their employees and their customers. It's economically motivated. They're in the business to make money, and security and IT, for that matter, are line item expenses that take away from the bottom line. So what is, and I speak somewhat in generalities, but what is more often the case in the private sector is companies, with exceptions, I'll acknowledge, but most companies, they're only going to do what they have to do in terms of security. So
Right.
their tactic is to do the bare minimum, spend as little, do it on the cheap, whatever gets by, whatever gets the proverbial check in the box of whatever regulatory compliance standard that they have to meet. If they don't have that, they typically don't do that much other than, obviously from IT, get up and running, stay in business, competing in this modern connected world. So how does that translate then to private citizens at home, even before the consideration of the new world that we're living in? For the most part, most people don't think about it and don't really care. I know that I'm not answering your question, but I'm saying your question comes in my mind after having some more significant conversations about why should we do anything. And in the instance, going back to the Florida plan, I was on a virtual happy hour the other night talking with a lot of government people that are much more connected to what was going on and what has been going on with this Florida treatment plant in particular, but protecting critical infrastructure in general. And it came down to the fact that because this is they're not even private sector, they're public sector, but they tend to be quasi-government and they tend to be local government, and they're notoriously underfunded, from an IT perspective, yet alone security perspective. They rely a lot on automation, but largely they're not regulated in a security or cybersecurity sense. They have other regulations like the stop gaps and the alerts that probably did save the day, other than the guy noticed that the valves were changing, but the testing of the water before it went out into the public to see that the lye levels were going up, that type of thing. That there's safety regulation in that instance, but not security regulation. So lack of regulation is, I think, the heart of the problem in that context. From a tactical standpoint, if you're an enterprise, you're going to do what you have to do, and if you're big enough and you've got money enough, you're gonna invest in more things, and you get to buy more boxes and bells and whistles and machines with blinky lights. If you're an SMB, you're much more likely going to do the bare minimum, whatever you get by to get that checkbox, or you're outsourcing, you're relying on somebody else to do it. And if you're a private citizen, largely, unless you're in the security IT space, you're largely oblivious to everything that we're talking about. All the technology we use, you assume it works, and you're happy to get the ads and the coupons and the, oh, I wondered I was going to buy that. Yeah, I should go buy that. Oh, look at that magic connection. Wow, it's giving me all sorts of information. I was just talking about this.
I mean, we're willing to sell our data for convenience, right? And that's the irony.
Well, I kind of disagree with that, though, because people aren't even aware that they're selling their data.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, and that's kind of the thing that's going on right now between Apple and Facebook, where Facebook is going hard against Apple because Apple is changing some of the privacy settings for the benefit of the users on the iPhone, which is 50 to 60% of Facebook's revenue, because they use a universal tracking cookie across everything so that they can better advertise to you. And most people don't even know that there's universal ways to track you across all of your devices now. So they're not even aware that they're giving away all of their information. But to the point is, it's like, I'm guilty of this myself, right? Like, I use Google Maps when I'm trying to drive somewhere versus Apple Maps, because Google Maps, harvests up everybody else's information who's using their cell phone while they're driving around. So the experience and the traffic routing on Google is way better. And I get to where I want to go, a lot quicker when there's traffic out there. And yes, I'm giving up my information and I'm participating in it, because there was some German guy, I think a while ago, he put a bunch of cell phones in a wagon and then parked them on a street. So it would affect all of the information being sent up to the mapping services. And then he created a traffic jam because they all sent people around this one street where this, little dude was walking up and down it with a little red wagon full of cell phones. And, that's the kind of environment that we're in. It's like the line of awareness that they should even be worried about these things. It's just not out there generally. And to me, that's very frightening because, to Jeff's point, a lot of this goes to motivation and to systemic responses. And, like I mentioned earlier, our government is very guilty of these kind of things. And, we're in a race with Russia, with China, with North Korea, and all these, actors who have, who are trying these kind of tactics out just to see how they work. And, there's bills in the military or in the government over here to say, like, can we have a military response to an information internet attack, which to me is kind of a very frightening thing because the attribution of these attacks is so difficult. By design, you could say to hide, you don't want to give up the information of who's attacking who. So why not blame somebody else? And I don't think that the public is aware of this at all because, like not to get too political, but the head of what was the guy who went off and immediately started his own cybersecurity company, but he was the chief cybersecurity executive of America. And, Trump just fired him because he said he disagreed with him that the elections were fully valid, and it didn't seem to make most people.
Are you referring to Chris Krebs?
Yeah, Chris Krebs.
Yes,
yeah.
thank you.
He didn't actually go start his own company. He got hired by SolarWinds, ironically.
Well, no, I thought he had a company with somebody else where he's basically a consultancy.
Well, he might be doing that on the side, but the headline I saw was that he got picked up by SolarWinds.
Oh yeah, but my main point is he got fired for disagreeing.
A lot of people got fired though, so I think we're okay.
Yeah, well, no, true, but he got fired, and it was he was trying to do something on a federal level, which for a lot of these attacks, especially like the nation state type of attacks, we have to have a federal response to it. Just kind of like with the vaccines that are going out right now, they move the responsibility of vaccinating people down to the states. And, that's the logistics of that are problematic because not every state has the ability to handle the logistics right now, and especially since the people they asked on the state level to do the logistics are also the people running the hospitals that are overloaded dealing with the frontline parts of COVID. So it's sorry, I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but these are systemic issues.
They are, and I feel bad because I feel like I didn't answer Sia's question, so I do want to try to give you a succinct answer to your tactics question, and this is mostly true for enterprise and SMB, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier of understanding your motivations, understanding your strategy, and if you're beholden to regulations, compliance standards, and you've got that attitude of doing the bare minimum, stop, pause, take a look, and step back and try to understand that probably the compliance regulatory standard that you're being held to is probably fairly comprehensive and would get you a long way. And for the love of God, most of these companies wouldn't get breached if a few basic things were happening, mostly involving passwords,
Right.
and now more so than ever using. I'm old fashioned. I call it two-factor authentication. MFA is a marketing term, which is an aside. Most of the conversations and the buzzwords are coming from the marketing departments, not from the practitioners. So two-factor authentication. And use a strong password, and that's true to the consumer in the household, or now the remote employee. Go change the password on your Wi-Fi router and make it long and complex, and and do that wherever you can, and enable two-factor authentication wherever you can.
And I give Apple credit for, not to get partisan here, because I know Sia's not an Apple fan, but they've started to integrate that stuff into their ecosystem, where when you go in, like you go to a website and it'll say, would you like me to create a complicated password for you? And then use your phone and your Mac. And I know you don't like multi-factor, but more than one factor is a way around making a password that's so heinous that you can't remember it, that you have to write it down. Or, if you make it easy to remember, then it's hackable. So it's a convenience thing. And most people will go towards the convenient path, not the secure path. At least that's what I found in my career. So if you can make it easy, so you smile at your iPhone does, Face ID for you, then it says, press this button to send your password token up. I think that's a better step. I don't think it solves the problem of broken, passwords as a security measure are broken, because, especially with the lists that they can put out there, and eventually the computing power will be such that even that encryption can be trivially broken.
Well, and you're touching on what to me is the biggest paradox in our industry, which is that if you talk to most aged, experienced security professionals, they will tell you that technology alone, technological solutions, what I call simply tools, alone don't make you secure, make you a secure organization, make you a secure.
I agree 100%.
There needs to be more than that. And yet our industry is sort of built around the ideas of automation, building security into things, providing those bells and whistles and blinky boxes, because our customers and coworkers, the consumers of all these things, don't understand it, don't want to understand it, don't think about it, don't want to think about it, don't really care. They just expect the technology to already have the security built into it. So there's this idea within our industry that security is something that's either somebody else's responsibility in the organization, or it's built into whatever it is that I'm using. I don't have to think about it. And that's different from the culture that I grew up in, back in the 80s in the Cold War, working for the DoD, where the entire organization, the culture of the organization was built around, we're doing a mission, our mission is secret, all the information and data associated with our mission needs to be protected, needs to be protected in multiple ways with multiple layers, and everybody has a role to play, and everybody has to follow the rules, and everybody understands the rules, and everybody just, it's built into the fabric of their day-to-day work life. And while any one thing might fail, it didn't cause a total system failure. I'm talking mostly in a physical security sense in that context. But that, as an aged professional that started in the DoD and came out into the private sector, and just like everybody else ran around trying to explain how, what companies need to do to be secure. And it always boils down to, tell us what I need to buy, how many I need to buy, where do I need to put them, and what do I do if the light stops being green and turns amber or red.
It's the external. I call it the external solution. Right. Everybody wants a product to add on, or another blinking light to put in your data center. And now we're
oh, I forgot. Or the most important one, the machine that goes ping.
You're cracking me up on here, guys, because I know it's not a question of just throwing more software or throw another box in. You do have to have a process in place, though, and procedures in place. Obviously, humans are going to be the easy. I think, to me, it's the lowest common denominator. As long as social engineering is going to exist, phishing and humans, we as humans, I think, tend to trust more than not trust, right? And so for me, in my perspective, what I'm hearing from you guys is you really have to have this assumption that if I was a CISO, for example, looking at my organization, is it an extreme viewpoint to just go with a zero trust policy, meaning I assume everything traversing my networks is potentially bad. And then I will create a policy framework around that with that assumption? Is that going to be a safe one, or is that, do you think it's an extreme thing?
Well, it used to be considered an extreme thing, back when John Kindervag started marketing this out when he was still back at Gartner, right? He, in the early days, he would talk about it and, in conversations with them, people would kind of laugh him out of the room like, oh, you don't need that. You just need a strong firewall at the perimeter, and that's all you need. But now, as COVID has shown and everything, everyone, you can be working from anywhere, anytime, and actually people are demanding it, right? Like, I want to be able to work from my iPad wherever I am. I want to be able to work from my cell phone, so you don't have just I don't go to the office anymore and sit down at my desktop, and that's the only way that I have to worry about security. So, the perimeter has to shrink around the device you're using, and you're going to be using many multiple devices. So you need to have those devices intrinsically secure, not, externally made secure. And that's where a lot of the bad transitions are happening right now. Or I shouldn't say bad transitions, but those are the difficult conversations you're having right now, because most applications were built under the assumption that they didn't need to be secure, or if they needed security, it was bolted on from the outside, like a firewall was put around them, or they were, logically separated out. So that the companies that are building things in the cloud, which by nature if you're doing it correctly, the security is more built into the application, and therefore it's intrinsically more secure versus externally. And
yeah, you're touching on so many things there. One of the failures of so many of us people that came out of the DoD and thought we were going to, change the world and get rich in the process, to be completely honest, of teaching security to the masses. We came out with the classic military principle of building a secure perimeter, building barricades and walls with moats, and things like that, and the further into the organization or network that you went, the softer it tended to be, because you had those perimeter protections. I certainly can't claim credit to this. I've heard other people, sort of float this idea that I agree with, that the focus finally needs to be off the perimeter, because what the hell is a perimeter these days?
Right.
And this is really why I say I'm an information security professional and not a cybersecurity professional, because at the end of the day, to quote Ben Kingsley character from the movie Sneakers, the old Robert Redford movie, it's all about the information, so it's protecting the data and figuring out data flows, data storage. What data do you have that is valuable, and how valuable is it, and to what degree, and for how long? These are things, like I said, back in the DoD, these were entrenched into all the processes and procedures. I used to work for a top secret, organization. We had top secret classifications, we had confidential, and even amongst the most secret, top secret information, even then it was compartmentalized. Not everybody that had that level of clearance needed to know everything that was going on. And some top secret information had to be protected for 5 years. Other top secret information has to be protected for 20 years. Other top secret information pretty much has to be protected forever. That's never translated well into the private sector. In the private sector, we make the companies do data classification, but it's typically confidential or not. We care about it or we don't, and it's all lumped together. And I would suggest that companies, and again, exploring before their tactics, exploring their motivations. What are we trying to accomplish? Take a deeper look at the history of, wow, there used to be data classifications that were matrixed. Maybe we need to apply that to our organizations. And of course, I don't know how the new work world factors into this, because this is an idea that I had a couple of years ago. But maybe organizations need to figure out that certain data they need to protect forever. Therefore, it shouldn't be all over the place. It should be in that mythical interior, crown jewels, isolated place. But there's other data that, is less critical, that needs to be protected, but maybe not as long as we think. just and develop the layers of responses for all of that. Anyway, I could go on, but I will shut up.
No, I love that. I love it. And we could keep going on and on. So I want to ask one final question because we are getting up on time a little bit, gentlemen. So Jeff, you've talked to hundreds of CISOs and CEOs and C-suite. What would you consider, or what would you make suggestions on, to be dramatic, these attacks, and just for the namesake of, our podcast, ransomware, what should they put together in anticipation? Because it's eventually going to happen. They will eventually get hit. So what kind of survival plan would you recommend in 2021 for these executives?
I would recommend, if they don't have the expertise or knowledge in-house, go out and find somebody that can talk to them to it. I would avoid sort of the knee-jerk reaction, responding to the latest ambulance chasing, news mongering, short attention span media cycle. But so much of the stuff that makes the news these days, in terms of major breaches and particularly ransomware, are things that would be non-issues if organizations would focus on sort of the fundamental basic. I was listening to one of your other podcasts where you were distinguishing between basic and fundamental. It might have been somebody else. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but like I said, having strong passwords, using two-factor authentication. This is not, I hate to say, patch everything, because that's the easy answer. That's really hard to do. Figure out the most critical things that are involved in in your most critical data sets, and prioritize patching and keeping systems secure, which, by the way, you're supposed to be doing anyway, because you have a regulatory compliance standard that you're supposed to be following it. Basics, fundamentals, the blocking and tackling. Hate to use a sports analogy, but most, I think, people of my ilk in my tenure here, that's what we pull what's left of our hair out the most is, time and time again, the sophisticated attack boiled down to not that somebody clicked on a link, but the malware that they launched was exploiting a vulnerability that the patch had been available for 7 years.
Yeah.
And that's inexcusable. And yet it's completely understandable if you are sitting in the shoes of the business operation and they're trying to prioritize and trying to economize their scant available resources, and they don't really know what they're doing anything, because a million other people, sales and marketing people and their people and whoever, are telling them to buy this, do that, do that. And, I don't know how anybody that doesn't know this business inside and out, if you remember the old days, pre-COVID, trade shows like RSA conference or Black Hat conference, walking the trade show floor and being bombarded by the thousands of messages, which are all strangely sounding the same, or using every year, it's the same theme buzzwords that seem to emerge. I don't know how you navigate that. I don't navigate it well, and I've been in this industry almost 40 years. So try to shut all that out and focus on what are the basics. And if you're not sure, there's probably a regulatory compliance standard that you're supposed to be following that probably has the basics in there that you should be following. And if you're not sure, hire somebody like me, who's an independent consultant that's interested in making sure you're as secure as you need to be and can help you navigate what's important, what's not, what do you care more about, what do you care less about, and putting it in the context of why you should care about this, why it matters. Because if you do these things that seem innocuous and inane and annoying and boring and repetitive and not sexy at all, are actually going to help you at the end of the day to have a non-news event, and then nobody knows.
I think you've nailed it on the head, right? Because, in my viewpoint, security, people used to, at least when I had these conversations, would say, oh, it's kind of like insurance. Like, you kind of put security measures together so you don't have your name broadcasted on the news the next day. But really, I see the shift of security really moving towards actually enabling business and securing and ensuring business can continue. It's not just we'll just buy a couple software packages, apps here and there to some firewalls there. It's really now part of actually increasing business productivity and ensuring that business actually can continue to function. It's more integrated is what I'm saying now, is what I'm seeing.
Well, it's to agree with everything Jeff said. It's you need to follow the basics, but also nowadays, since COVID is a very strong forcing function, and it's put a lot of businesses on the internet, whether they like it or not. Like every restaurant has to be on the internet now to do, takeaways or any type of meal distribution, right? Because some places they're still not even allowed to have people sit in them.
Right.
So it's now the standard for working on the internet used to have security as optional. With all of these, newsworthy dramatic events that keep coming up, it's shown that the bar has been raised. It's no longer sufficient, to blissfully ignore security. You have to have some sort of a strategy for when it happens to you. Obviously, you would love to prevent it as much as you can, but it's almost as important to figure out if this does happen to me, to make fun of ransomware, right? Like if they do come in and encrypt all of your servers, do you have a backup of those servers that is not encrypted? What is your disaster? It's like Jeff was saying that, like these are standard things like disaster recovery plans. Like it used to be if your data center got hit by a hurricane or, a jet airplane crashed into your data center, what would you do? And, the technologies now are out there, but people still aren't using them, right? Like you could have a virtual data center in the cloud, to store your backups and leave it, turned off just except for the, your backups synchronizing. Or, if you're a smaller company, you could have a solution like Airgap where you could say it's security isn't my competency, but if I get affected by ransomware, I would like a kill switch, or I would like some kind of mitigation where I could, I used to call it like my grandmother who was born before electricity was available. Whenever she didn't know how to turn an appliance on or off, she would pull the plug out of the wall. And, it's a brutally effective way to do, to accomplish the thing that you want to do. And it wasn't, until later in my life that I realized, because she was born before electricity started, that they didn't have, when electricity first came out, you literally didn't have a switch. So to turn things on and off, you would have to plug them, unplug and plug things in, because a switch was an innovation, so that to me, to have that kind of a functionality like that Airgap provides for people who don't want to have a, dedicated security person on staff where they can just press a button and then it turns everything off. And then they would likely, as I'm sure Jeff understands, hire a team to come in and do forensically and try to, dig them out of the situation that they're in. You need that kind of a thinking, like you need a response to this, not in case it happens, but when it happens.
One final point I would like to make, if I may, is I think a lot of this boils down to a fundamental misunderstanding of what it is we actually do. And this is within our community of security professionals as well as the whole world. Ask somebody sometime, what is security? You say you're a security professional. What is it? And to cut to the chase, I think in our community, it boils down to two things. One, security in the sense of it's a state that you achieve. You've created an impenetrable, impermeable environment, system, network, whatever, that can't be penetrated, can't be compromised, can't be breached. And I think that's what most people think of when they talk about security. I would propose that there's a second, and I think it's actually a more important definition of security. I simply say security is a verb. It's something you do. It's a journey. It's a process. It's all the things that you do to try to monitor your operations, monitor your enterprise, monitor your environment, and try to pay attention to if something's bad might be happening and stopping it, halting it, preventing it, minimizing the damage of it. But it's all the things you do that's essentially monitoring and detection and response. Whereas most of what our industry talks about, which is vulnerability, whack-a-mole, threat detection, and all that kind of stuff, is all to get you to a state of being impenetrable and impermeable and being secure. That's where most of the industry goes. That's where most of the money is spent. But the unsung heroes are the ones that are, standing guard, standing watch. They've got their finger on the pulse of the network, and they have, and these are people that I've met over the years in what I consider to be secure organizations. They're the ones that there's something not right, and I'm going to investigate it and figure out what's going on. And it's not science as much as they just know their box, they know their system, they know their network well enough, and they know what's normal well enough to know when something's not normal, and they investigate it. And of course, unfortunately, that we attempt to automate, and out of, because of all the technology, we actually have to automate a lot of that. But behind all the automation, in my opinion, there still needs to be that person or persons that just have that innate sense and the experience and the familiarity with what's normal to detect what's not normal, and hopefully minimize the damages caused by the inevitable breach.
No, I love it. And on that note, I mean, guys, we could keep talking, and we are way over time than normal. Jeff, I see you, and I love it. I've decided you're my friend, Jeff, and I really enjoy talking to you. For those that want to get to know you more, how can one get a hold of you, or what, I know you've written some great books, so share us with us. How do we get a hold of you?
From a day job consulting perspective, my email is jman@obsglobal.com. That's online business systems. I also do podcasting. I host a podcast called Security and Compliance Weekly, which is why I was talking about compliance this whole time. And I'm a co-host on Paul's Security Weekly. You can find either of them at securityweekly.com.
Excellent, you guys. That was such a fun conversation for me. It's actually a reinforcement. I'm just saying, our conversations, it's not like rocket science. It's nothing new, but it's discipline. It sounds like to me what's resonating every time I hear you guys talking, it has a lot to do with having process and procedures put into place, right? So you understand what the steps are, but having the discipline to maintain it, to actually do it, on a weekly or monthly basis, whatever your policy requires you to do, or what you guys want to set for your business. So guys, thank you so much for your time. I think this is a great opportunity for us to just go ahead and stop it right here. Talking about tactics and measures for ransomware in the enterprise workplace. That will wrap it up for the Ransomware Battleground. Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend. Until next time.
You too. Bye-bye.